Listen. You're in a privileged position to learn a thing or two. Keep your mouth shut and your eyes open.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Zak. Thank you so much for joining me. We begin this hour in Israel, where defense officials are defending the country's latest offensive in Gaza. Israel Defense Forces conducted an airstrike on a prominent high-rise building in Gaza City on Saturday. The bombing leveled the structure, which had housed several media outlets, including the Associated Press and Al Jazeera. Israeli defense officials claim they have evidence Hamas used the building for military assets. Civilians inside the building were given an hour to evacuate before the missile struck. The White House has not issued an official statement on the attack. However, President Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas earlier today. During his call with Netanyahu, Mr. Biden voiced support for Israel's right to defend itself from Hamas and other terrorist groups in Gaza. He also raised concerns over the growing number of civilian casualties. During his call with President Abbas, Mr. Biden discussed plans to strengthen U.S.-Palestinian relations. He pointed to the revitalized efforts by the U.S. to provide support and assistance to the Palestinian people. He also stressed the need for Hamas to cease firing rockets into Israel. At a news conference on Saturday, military officials said chances of a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas are dwindling.
A ceasefire now will just help Hamas to recover, and we'll end up with the same situation that we were in the day before the operation, or the day before this conflict began, which means that Hamas will have the opportunity to start a conflict, a military conflict, whenever they want, and they will have the opportunity to launch missiles on Israeli citizens and terror attacks on Israeli citizens whenever they choose.
Barak Ravid joins me now. He's a diplomatic correspondent at Walla News in Israel and a contributing correspondent for Axios based in Tel Aviv. Thank you for being with us, Barak. So what new information did you learn from that press, or were there any new details that surprised you?
No, I don't think, at least to me, there was nothing that was new. I think that this briefing was mostly meant for the international press after this, the bombing of this building in Gaza that hosted many media outlets, including the AP. And I think the Israelis were very keen on trying to first explain why they targeted this building, and second, to try and do some damage control when it comes to their the international press after what happened. Because I think that in the beginning of this operation, the Israelis was pretty satisfied with the way the international press covered what was going on in Gaza, the missile attacks on Israel, and in the last day or two, at least what I heard from Israeli officials, they were more concerned that the trend was changing. And I think that what happened today, both the attack that killed 10 civilians in Gaza, 2 women and 8 children, and this attack on this building in Gaza, I think they were very, very worried that this would continue to change the trend and that they would get a lot more critical press around the world. I think this is the main reason they did this event.
I want to follow up with you on that point because Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Knurkes from the Israeli Defense Forces said that they have only hit military targets. In particular, he responded to questions about that building that houses so many international media outlets. He said regarding that Hamas has embedded their operations inside civilian buildings. What did you make of his response, and also the fact that he said that they could not provide any additional evidence to back up those claims at this time?
Well, first, there's one thing that I should say in the colonel's defense, and this is that when he says that they're only targeting military facilities, he's right. That's their intention. The intention of the IDF is to target only military facilities. The only problem is that in a place like Gaza, that is very, very small, and when the population is so dense, it is almost impossible to engage in airstrikes without hitting civilians. And this is why every Israeli operation in Gaza ends with a big number of civilian casualties. And at least in my opinion, it's of course that the intention matters, okay? But still, the fact, even if it wasn't the intention and so many civilians are hit, this is a major concern.
And we also heard the colonel arguing that Hamas has actually been responsible for killing several of their own people in those civilian deaths with rockets that misfired. What more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, that's a claim that the Israeli military has been making for several days now. I have no independent information that can corroborate this claim. They claim that something like 30% of the rockets fired from Gaza land inside the Gaza Strip because of malfunctions, and that some of it hits Palestinians, and some of the Palestinians that were wounded or killed, that it happened because of Hamas or Islamic Jihad rockets. That's their claim. I have no independent information to corroborate it. And the IDF also didn't present any such evidence. What we do know, and it's very clear for almost forever, that a lot of Hamas's military capabilities are embedded inside civilian areas. Again, it's Gaza. The same way that Israel, doesn't want to target civilians, but when it's Gaza, it's almost impossible not to target civilians. The same way, when Hamas fires from Gaza, Hamas knows that he's doing it from populated areas. And I think that there was a lot of evidence over the years of rocket launchers that were found inside residential buildings, inside, sometimes there were rocket caches inside UNRWA schools in Gaza. So I think that, again, both Hamas and Israel, at the end of the day, are engaged in military activity that harms Palestinian civilians. And this is the tragedy in Gaza, that you have a very large population of almost 2 million people, that most of it is not involved in the fighting. But it's still suffering for many, many years, and with many people wounded and killed.
And I want to follow up with you on that point because President Biden spoke with Israeli President Benjamin Netanyahu and the president of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas. In both calls, he expressed concern about civilian casualties, and he also expressed his commitment to a two-state solution. How realistic is that last point, and what role might the U.S. play in brokering peace?
Well, first, it's not realistic. I'll tell you more than that. The phone call between Biden and Abbas, that it took, almost 4 months for this phone call to take place, which is, in my opinion, quite odd. President Trump called Abbas after 2 months. For Biden, it took 4 months. very, very odd. But President Abbas has no influence whatsoever on what's going on in Gaza. He is totally irrelevant. And this call with him that, I think it's important, but it has nothing to do with the current crisis in Gaza. It does have a lot to do with tensions in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem. Those are two places that Abbas can play a major role in trying to lower tensions and de-escalate the situation. Palestinian security forces are under his command in the West Bank, and they can contribute a lot to de-escalating the situation. But I think that what we saw in this call with Biden is that the U.S. slowly but steadily is putting more and more pressure on Israel to end the fighting. It's not a lot of pressure. It is very polite, very, with a lot of subtext. But the U.S. is telling Israel, you're running out of time.
Speaking of running out of time, we only have a few more moments left, and I really want to get to the point about the potential for a ceasefire, because it was very interesting to hear Laura Hayat, the Israeli Foreign Ministry spokesperson, say that a ceasefire right now would just favor Hamas. I'm wondering what you make of that and what we should expect about the potential for a ceasefire in the coming days.
Well, Lior Hayat is a good friend that I've known him for many, many years, but I don't think what he said is accurate. I'll say it very diplomatically. I think we will see in the next 24 hours a beginning of talks to start and see whether ceasefire is a possibility. This does not mean that the ceasefire will happen tomorrow. Usually it takes, there's a breaking distance that you need to go from the point that you start talking about a ceasefire when the ceasefire actually happens. Usually it can take 3, 4, 5 days sometimes. But I think that sometime tomorrow we will see a beginning of talks on a possible ceasefire.
We are all hoping for those. Barak Ravid, thank you so much for joining us and lending us your expertise.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Listen. You're in a privileged position to learn a thing or two. Keep your mouth shut and your eyes open. Why?